Hello, my name is George. This is GLLR Cars. Welcome to the channel. Today we're talking the 2017 Ford Fusion. So the 2017 Ford Fusion is a car that was just added to the fleet. In my previous video, I was talking about adding a car to the fleet. This wasn't supposed to be it. So if you remember in previous videos, I reviewed a 2014 Ford Fusion. So maybe that's the topic of another video, but this is the result of a claim, an accident that basically totaled that 2014 Fusion. And trying to keep up with, trying to stay with what I had, trying to, at least after getting the insurance funds to be able to replace what was a total loss, the logical choice was another Fusion. This is the 2017 model. So this Ford Fusion is about the same trim level. There's basically an SE, an SEL, there is a titanium edition. This is the SE trim level. It is got the same type of engine. They boosted the power up a little bit from the previous one, and for the most part try to stay with what I have. Obviously a few changes that I can talk about because it's 3 years younger than the previous one, but for the most part the car, at least from the outside, is unchanged. I'll review it a little bit more. If you're thinking of buying a used Ford Fusion, I think that there's a good deal to have. It's a car that has a great value, and that's the reason why when I needed to replace my 2014 Fusion, I looked for another used Fusion, and a 2017 being just a couple of years used represents an excellent value. So for those of you who had never seen the features or never saw one of my other videos, I can talk very briefly about what it is about this vehicle that I like. And let me start with the outside design. If you look at the design of this car, let's start with the very front view. It's a very aggressive, very sporty look. If you're looking at the front view, it's like that of many sports cars. If something that you'll notice is the fog lights on the bottom, they're a little bit more squared off in that they have the black trim in the middle. And aside from that, the grille is different based on the trim level that you have, but it is a very good view that it has. I see how they made this change where it looks a little bit more upscale. The rims on the other end, I don't have the black those blacked out rims that I had before, but these are not bad. I like the design very much. It is, I don't mind rims that are chrome looking, but I like the fact that they're not overly shiny, a little bit too shiny. So I do like this very much. The exterior of the car, with the design, with the very long protruding nose, with the lines that come across the hood and the sides here over the wheel wells, it's something that has always appealed to me about the car. The matching color on the mirrors with the black on the other end is something else that I've always liked about the car, as well as the nice sloping roof line. So if you were to stand, in fact, if I look from this angle here and you're standing right around here, one thing that you'll notice is how it slopes over, and it's got the long glass that kind of makes a nice design blending with the hood. And then in the back, this one does have a little bit of a sports wing back here to give it a little bit of an extra design touch. And this is something that you can still get it with it or without it. I think that's what I can talk about in terms of the outside. The power, so this is the EcoBoost SE, which is a 1.5 cylinder engine, just like the previous one, but instead of 175 horsepower, it's 181 horsepower. So this one has a little bit more power. I think that's probably common with most automakers, where they tune the engine a little bit and get a little bit more power on later model years, and it's no different with this car. Now let's take a look at the inside. So not much has changed in terms of the design here. One of the things that they kept, which I always liked, is this dial control here. So you basically can put in a pin number here, and if you lock yourself out of the car, or if you for whatever reason don't want to carry the keys with you, I know many folks who have these systems that many Fords have, and they basically don't take the keys with them anymore. They don't take it anywhere. They always leave them in the car because you still need them to drive the car. But looking inside, so it's one of the things that you'll notice that the interior is slightly different. They have the leather around the edges, and then a little bit of cloth with the stitching in the middle. And this one is the one that does have the push button start, as opposed to the one that I had before. The screens in the middle, let's just turn it on. So press the brake, press that, get that started. And again, the digital displays as they've had in the other cars, which has worked pretty well for Ford with the color matching. That, well, let me rephrase that, not color matching anymore, it is color coded. So if I go through, in this case, phone and entertainment is color coded, but it's not color matching because of the sync system. So this sync system is different. It is sync version 3, and what they did here is, rather than doing the 4 corners with the different colors, which by the way was, I thought it was a great touch. Apparently some folks thought it was very confusing. There was a lot of clutter to it, so as a result they came up with this cleaner interface, and then you have all your functions across the bottom here, where you get to kind of go through your stations, your climate, whatever phone you have, apps. It supports Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. It has some deep pockets down here. You can connect here or in the glove compartment. What's different from the previous one? Got the knob shifter, the electronic park brake, and over here the automatic start stop. So if I do that at the traffic light, it's not going to stop the engine. Other than that, the steering wheel is pretty much the same from the 2014 models. You can control all of your extra display functions here, like trip information, fuel economy, display modes, fuel efficiency here, and you get to cycle through various views here. In terms of the display mode, you can change different gauges, like tire pressure and whatnot. So this is, I think, is very useful. It's very intuitive and simple enough that you just basically have to go arrow up and down or left and right. And same thing here with whatever device that you decide to connect. What I would like to see in the future is this analog gauge become part of the digital display, so that moving forward, then you don't just control the displays on the sides, but you'll be able to control what's in the middle. So you can make this different colors, different shapes or whatnot. And we've seen more and more automakers make the instrument cluster completely digital. Over on the side, you got your known controls for the windows and locks, your mirrors on left and right, lock controls here. In terms of storage and space, it's no different than the 2014 model. Big compartment there for the glove compartment with a shelf in the middle. Over here, cup holders, and then the center console here would just have a one thing that's different here. This tray here in the 2014 was a tiny tray that was across like these little guide rods that you have to remove and put back on top. Instead, they built this in such a way that it's a hinged little door. You get to see the compartment down below. So they did a good job there. Other than that, it is very well put together. I said this once and I'll say it again. This is a grown-up car. When you drive this car, when you're inside this interior, you have the feel, the view, and the comfort of basically a grown-up car. And it's meant to be a compliment. I don't mean to say it in a way of, this is like your grandfather's Buick or anything like that. This is a sporty looking car that is pleasing to look at, and now we can talk about what it's like to drive it. So one of the things that I like in terms of space is these chairs are all the way back, and despite being all the way back, I can sit down here. Yeah, other than where The feet are what it's going to slide a little bit under there. It's going to fit just fine. So you can see that it's good space, good head space, and plenty of head space actually. And in terms of like how wide it is and my shoulder space, I think that although 3 people can fit in here, it's a lot better if you just have 2. But again, if I scoot over a little bit and I give a lot of bit of space for the person that would sit in the middle, there is room there. I always try to avoid that, but if we're gonna sit 4 people will sit comfortably. We got, just like in the other models, you have that armrest with cup holders, very generous size cup holders, and you still have the ability to have a headrest here that you can adjust. And again, it's got the creature comforts of a car that you can fit 4 very, very comfortably. One thing to point out is the locks. So these cars don't have the mechanical locks that will protrude out when you lock the car, or you unlock the car rather, and then recess there. This is actually a light that will have an indicator that when I lock the door, it will be blinking red, or it won't be blinking if it is unlocked. But it's nice touch to have an indicator there. Then it's now digital. There's no way to pop something with a wire hanger or something like that. It's a little bit more security in that regard. Let's take a look at the trunk. So the trunk is very generous in size. It's 2 ways to open the trunk. One is the button here, just right there by that rear camera. By the way, I need to clean that camera a little bit. And the other one is using your key fob. This very large and generous trunk. It's got, you know, that giant thing of water and my camera bag there. But if you take a look at this, you could probably fit, and I know why they keep using the golf bag reference, but you could probably put like a total 3 golf bags across the bottom and maybe another 3 on the top. That will give you an idea how big that is. There's plenty of space, and if you need more space than that, then you basically need to find a truck. But this is more than fits the bill there. First impression is the higher end feel that the car has for its price. So it's got a pretty good value in that. It feels more upscale than you think it would, or it should, but it just feels that way. The ride is very soft, but not too wobbly. It has got enough stiffness for the turns and the handling, but is very soft, very pleasurable to drive. It feels, like I said, it feels a little bit more upscale. It's got a very good feel to it. The wheel has a little bit of stiffness to it, and although it cannot be compared to a high-performance car or a luxury vehicle, for this segment it's actually quite good. So it is stiff enough that you can feel when you're making the turns, and responsive enough for you to have a good driving experience. The acceleration is adequate, so if I punch it a little, it responds with adequate punch. It is not meant to be a very punchy engine, but it does get the job done. One thing that I noticed is when I'm driving it and I have the need to punch it, let's say I need to pass lanes, or I need to, just for the enjoyment of it, being able to accelerate it a little bit, just give it a little bit of punch. It is a little bit better in the lower range. So when I punch it, I feel a little bit more. As the RPMs get a little bit higher, it doesn't feel like it gives you a lot. So your best bet is to get that acceleration either from 0, or like right there, or when you just punch it and you're below, say, 30 miles an hour. Once you're cruising at a faster speed than that, it's not going to feel like it's going to give you a good deal of acceleration beyond that little excitement that you get at the beginning. So for more day-to-day driving needs, that's more than adequate. Again, if you're needs are beyond just the adequate and you really want a sports feel, then you're looking for the wrong car. This car is not meant to give you that. My other comment is related to the transmission. So the transmission, it seems to know when it needs to shift. I never experienced with this transmission the annoying feature that some cars have, that if you punch it and it's in a lower gear, it will not shift up. So as you pull back from the accelerator, that lower gear itself slows down the car. So again, if you have the ability to manually control it, you could. This car, fortunately, you still can, because it's got paddle shifters. So you can set your transmission here, and it's got the knob instead of just the lever where you can put it in drive and whatnot, and then you press the center button, and then you can shift up and down with the paddle shifters, which is a very nice welcome touch for this car. The turning radius, I would say, is about average to cars of this size. Keep in mind that the wheelbase is on par with cars of this mid-range sedan. Some things that I like is that it uses the 3rd generation sync system. So this being a 2017, it features, at least in the Fords, most Fords starting in 2016, they started using the sync version 3. So this being a 2017 Fusion, it already has it, and it's a little more polished, it's a little bit less cluttered, and it supports features like Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. So at least for me, that's very important, because as I mentioned in previous videos, if you have that capability, you don't really need a navigation system. In fact, even if you have a navigation system, you may not use it as much, knowing that both the turn-by-turn directions from things like Google Maps, I know that Apple Maps may not be as good, but it still beats most navigation systems. The Waze maps with the traffic information and hazards and whatnot, it is second to none. So having that capability in your car on your infotainment screen is a huge plus. So I'm liking where this is going, where most cars are doing this, and this car has that. So it's got the driving dynamics of a car that would normally be in the sports range. May not have the power of a sports car, but it does give you some of the features and some of the capabilities of it, in terms of, like I mentioned before, the paddle shifters, the manual mode, and very good transmission. It behaves the way you want it to. The steering is very stiff, and it's just a pleasure to drive. If you are using this car, let's say for a commuter or something for cruising around, or even if some of you that have a family and don't want an SUV, this car has the size for it as well. So right now I'm really seeing a car that checks many boxes, and it does do a pretty good job at finding some compromises. I believe that the biggest compromise is the price versus performance compromise. So if you can provide a very low price and you have acceptable performance, then that car offers a very good value. Some cars, they basically tip the scale one way or the other. They even try to bring the price very low and sacrifice in performance significantly. Others try to give you very good performance, and then they're basically unaffordable. So I think that in the case of the Ford Fusion, they did a good job in finding a good balance. I know that people's scales are different, but going back to checking many boxes, if you try to find I guess the biggest segment of the population that would fit within those parameters, I think that's probably what this car will do. Okay, so why did I choose a Ford Fusion? So I can talk about that a little bit. what other car with the features that I just showed you, with the dynamic driving feel that it has, with the upscale components that I showed you, would you be able to find for about $15,000 in the summer of 2019 for a 2017 model? That would be this car. Keep into consideration that if you're looking for cars that match that price, yes, you may be able to find those. There's a few more that are out there. There's a few more that you may not find as many parts as easily or as cheaply, or find the service that you need cheaply or easily. And I just go with what I know, and if I know that something is working well and it's not broken, then there's no need to fix it. So if the Ford Fusion is doing a good job, I see no reason to change it to something else. Hence the reason why I stayed with a Ford Fusion. And the 2017 model, I can see the differences. I can see the subtle changes in terms of power, in terms of the tech. So in power, we talked about the higher horsepower. It went up to 181 from 175. In terms of the tech, it went to the Sync 3, and now it supports Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. It has the electronic knob shifter instead of the lever shifter for the gears. The transmission is very smooth. The components, the interior, it does look very similar, but it is those subtle feels of the materials that they use that make it feel better. So all in all, is a very good bargain. And for something that we already know that it has held up the test of time, because the 2014, when I reviewed it at the time, it was already 5 years old. It was reviewed in 2019, so it was already 5 years old, and it held up pretty well. And so I know what the expectations are. No two cars are built exactly the same, that is true, but at least we know, or we have a better capability of know how it's going to be holding up like. The look of the car, every car has its own DNA, and over the years they do some subtle differences to see how that is going to be more evolutionary rather than revolutionary. And Ford has been very cautious not to be too drastic in how it changes it. I did talk about the fact that Ford is discontinuing, as well as many other car makers, many four-door sedans in favor of SUVs, and that is just the change of times. More people are buying SUVs, for better or for worse. That's where the market is, and that's where the money is. So that basically means an end to cars such as this, but as long as I can have them, and as long as people don't want them, then you'll find more bargains, because more people are looking for SUVs. So it's just the reality of what's going on today in today's car market. So again, I speak for where my money is. I put my money in this car, and if you put your dollars and you use your wallet to pay for what you believe in, nothing can speak louder than that. Ford Fusion is an excellent car. It's a great value car. Don't expect this car to beat all other cars in terms of performance or luxury, but in terms of that balance for the value, it's an excellent car. Gives you size, gives you capacity, gives you acceptable performance, gives you a good driving feel. What else can I say? I would highly recommend that you take a look at these cars. There are many out there in the market. Like I said before, many people are shopping for SUVs, and it depends, I think, whether it's a trend or not, and if some people's lives, they come full circle and then they're either not with a family, empty nesters, or divorced or whatever, and now they want a smaller car. That may change, but for now, that's the trend. I would probably tell you that as long as trends happen and we are in a position to take advantage of a trend where something that doesn't have high demand will create an oversupply, like in the case of this car or any other four-door car. There's going to be an oversupply until the car makers start basically just trimming back the production so that they don't have to basically be putting incentives to sell these cars, because then nobody's trying to buy them. And that's the case with this car. If you were wondering about the choices of where to get it to be able to find a good bargain, I have a video on that. I'll put the link to that video on the bottom. And in the end, whenever there's a situation like the accident that I'll talk about in a different video, and the need to find a replacement car, so long as you know what's coming and you have enough time to prepare and look for a car that you can replace it with, there's no better way to do it than use the very tips that I used in one of those previous videos. So that's how I ended up with this car. I'll try to have more videos on it and talk a little bit more about it, because I know that it will be intriguing to get some of your comments and understand what you feel about it. I feel very strong about this one myself, and be curious to see how you feel about it. My name is George. This is GLLR Cars, and as always, drive safe.